Close your eyes for just a moment, my friend. Breathe in deeply. Can you smell the faint, earthy scent of a freshly swept deck entryway? Or perhaps the sweet, grassy aroma of a new tatami mat warming in the afternoon sun? Can you hear the distant, rhythmic ticking of the heavy wooden clock on the wall? Or the cheerful chirp of cicadas on a blazing summer afternoon? Welcome back to the 1970s. Today, we are going to take a slow, gentle walk down memory lane to look at 20 forgotten things from Japan that shaped our youth. And make sure to stay with me until the very end, because the final memory we will share is one that captures the true essence of love and connection, something that will surely bring a warm tear to your eye. Time simply moved differently back then, did it not? In the Showa era, specifically through the late 1960s and the 1970s, the world was not rushing past us in a blur of digital screens and instant notifications. To live in that time meant to understand the profound beauty of waiting. We waited for a pot of rice to cook over a flame. We waited for a heavy black telephone to ring. We waited for a letter to arrive in the mail. And in those quiet spaces of waiting, we found real human connection. Modern society often tries to tell us that life before smartphones and instant delivery was somehow lacking. But we know the truth. We know that our lives were infinitely richer in sincerity, in community, and in emotional depth. Let us revisit those beautiful golden days together. And now, let us begin our journey by remembering the heavy, bright red public payphones that used to sit outside almost every neighborhood tobacco shop or local grocery store. Do you recall the very specific weight of a 10-yen coin in the palm of your hand? In the 1970s, making a phone call when you were away from home was a deeply intentional act. You could not simply send a quick text message. You had to find one of these red machines, lift the surprisingly heavy handset, and drop your coin into the slot. The sound of that heavy bronze coin falling into the mechanism was a loud, metallic clunk that signaled your time was starting. We would dial the rotary numbers, listening to the whirring sound of the dial returning to its place. And then, the anxious waiting began as the phone rang on the other end. If the conversation ran long, you had to frantically search your pockets for another 10-yen coin, listening to the warning tone, hoping you would not be disconnected from your loved one. Standing on the street corner, perhaps under a small awning while it rained, talking into that black mouthpiece, we learned the value of words. Every second of conversation cost us something, which made the voices of our friends and family on the other end of the line feel infinitely more precious than a free digital call today. Let us turn our minds to the warm, humid evenings of a Japanese summer and the unmistakable, comforting aroma of green mosquito coils slowly burning on the porch. Back in those days, air conditioning was not something we had in every room, if we had it at all. Instead, we opened all the sliding doors, relying on the gentle evening breeze to cool the house. And to keep the mosquitoes away, Mother would carefully light the tip of a spiraled green incense coil and place it inside a ceramic pig. Do you remember the soft, white wisp of smoke curling up into the twilight sky? The smell was earthy, slightly herbal, and instantly relaxing. It was the scent that told us the day was truly over. We would sit together on the wooden veranda wrapped around the house, perhaps eating a slice of cold watermelon and listening to the chorus of frogs in the nearby rice paddies. The glowing red cherry of the mosquito coil was sometimes the only light we needed as we watched the stars appear one by one. That humble coil did more than just repel insects. It created a quiet, sacred space for the family together to breathe in the night air and to talk in soft, hushed voices before retreating to our sleeping mats for the night. When the bitter chill of winter finally arrived, the streets of our neighborhoods would be graced by one of the most nostalgic sounds of the 1970s. Do you remember sitting in your warm living room, hearing the slow, melancholic, drawn-out chant echoing through the dark, frozen streets? It was the sweet potato vendor, slowly driving his small truck, calling out to the neighborhood. The moment we heard that hauntingly beautiful voice, we would beg our parents for a few coins, grab a thick sweater, and run out into the freezing night. The truck was a beacon of warmth, with a wood-fired stove built right into the back. The vendor would open the heavy iron door, releasing a magnificent cloud of steam and the incredibly sweet, caramelized aroma of roasted sweet potatoes. He would weigh the hot stones and the potatoes, wrapping your prize in a simple sheet of old newspaper. Holding that incredibly hot, fragrant package in your cold, bare hands as you hurried back home was a joy like no other. Breaking the dark purple skin to reveal the steaming golden yellow flesh inside felt like uncovering a precious treasure. It was a simple, inexpensive treat, but the ritual of chasing the truck and sharing that natural sweetness with your siblings made the harsh winters feel wonderfully warm and magical. Let us travel now to the lively, echoing halls of the neighborhood public bathhouse. Before every home was equipped with a modern private bathroom, a trip to the local bathhouse was an essential and beloved daily ritual. You would grab your small plastic basin, a towel, and your favorite soap and walk down the street, joining the steady stream of neighbors doing exactly the same. Do you remember handing your coins to the attendant sitting high up in the wooden booth at the entrance? Once inside, the sheer scale of the room was breathtaking. The high wooden ceilings filled with rising steam and the majestic, hand-painted mural of Mount Fuji on the tile wall made you feel like you were in a grand palace. The echoing sounds of splashing water, wooden stools scraping against the tile floors, and the loud, cheerful gossip of the neighborhood filled the air. It was a place where social status washed away with the dirt of the day. And the absolute best part came after the bath. You would step out, your skin glowing and warm, and purchase a cold bottle of fruit milk or coffee milk. Putting one hand proudly on your hip, you would drink it down in one go, feeling the icy liquid contrast with your heated body. That communal bathhouse was the beating heart of our neighborhoods, a place where we were never truly alone. Do you remember when household appliances were not just plain white or silver, but vibrant, joyful explosions of color? In the 1970s, the heart of our kitchens was often a rice cooker covered in massive, bright floral patterns. These green, orange, and yellow flowers decorated our thermoses, our pots, and our serving trays. It was a time of immense economic optimism in Japan, and families proudly displayed these cheerful designs on their kitchen counters. Preparing the evening meal was a deeply rhythmic task. Mother would carefully wash the white rice, letting the water run clear before setting the inner pot into that beautiful, heavy machine. We would go about our homework or our play, waiting for that glorious, heavy click sound that announced the rice was perfectly steamed. When the lid was finally lifted, a thick cloud of sweet, starchy steam would hit your face, carrying the promise of a comforting dinner. That floral rice cooker was a symbol of a mother's constant care. It stood there in the kitchen, silently keeping the rice warm for the father who came home late from a long day at the office, or for the hungry children returning from play. Those bright flowers faded over the years, but the memory of the nourishment and love they represented will never lose its vibrant color in our hearts. If you ever had the tremendous privilege of traveling on the bullet train during your youth, you will undoubtedly remember the unique way we drank tea on board. Before the era of convenient plastic vending machine bottles, the train stations sold warm green tea in small, somewhat squishy, translucent plastic containers. Do you remember the distinct, slightly earthy smell of the warm plastic mingling with the roasted aroma of the tea inside? The true genius of this little container was its cleverly designed lid. You would carefully unscrew the top, which was shaped exactly like a traditional teacup, and pour the hot tea into it. Sitting by the large window, watching the Japanese countryside blur past at impossible speeds, you would sip your tea from that tiny makeshift cup. The gentle rocking of the train made pouring it a delicate art, and spilling a little drop on the small fold-out table was part of the charm. Traveling was a rare and grand occasion back then. We dressed up in our best clothes to ride the train. Sharing a boxed lunch and pouring tea from that peculiar little container made the journey feel incredibly special and refined. It is a humble piece of packaging, but it holds within it the excitement of childhood adventures and family vacations long past. Let us gather around the center of our childhood living rooms, the heavy, low wooden dining table. Unlike the tall individual dining tables we use today, this short table required everyone to sit right on the woven tatami mats, resting on flat square cushions. Because the table was relatively small, the entire family had to sit shoulder to shoulder, our knees almost touching under the wooden rim. In the 1970s, this table was the stage for our entire domestic life. Do you remember how sturdy and smooth the polished wood felt under your hands? It was where we ate our morning rice and miso soup, where we diligently spread out our notebooks to do our evening homework, and where father would sit with his newspaper and a small cup of hot sake. There was no escaping each other at this table. If someone was sad, if someone was laughing, the emotion radiated around the tight circle instantly. And when the day was done, the table was wiped down, its short legs were folded underneath with a satisfying wooden clatter, and it was rolled away into the corner of the room to make space for our sleeping mats. That simple wooden circle forced us to look into each other's eyes, keeping the family bonded in a way that modern, sprawling furniture simply cannot replicate. Think back to the bright, overwhelmingly humid mornings of your summer vacations, and you will instantly hear the cheerful piano melody of the radio calisthenics broadcast. Long before the sun became unbearably hot, while the morning air still carried a faint trace of coolness, children all over Japan would wake up, rub the sleep from their eyes, and walk to the local park or schoolyard. Do you remember the slightly damp feeling of the morning dew on the grass beneath your shoes? We would stand in crooked rows, greeting our neighbors, as the booming voice from the portable radio instructed us to stretch our arms and bend our knees. It was a daily ritual of community discipline and shared morning energy. But the true motivation for us children was not the exercise itself. It was the little cardboard attendance card hung around our necks on a piece of string. After the exercises were complete, we would line up eagerly to have the older neighborhood volunteers press a red ink stamp onto our card for that specific day. Watching those empty white squares slowly fill up with red stamps gave us an immense sense of pride and accomplishment. It was a beautiful, innocent time when the entire neighborhood moved as one, starting the summer day with a collective breath of fresh air and a shared sense of joyful purpose. Let us take a nostalgic stroll down a narrow, unpaved alleyway to visit the neighborhood candy store. In our youth, the local sweet shop was much more than just a place to buy cheap snacks. It was an entire universe of wonder, socializing, and childhood commerce. Do you remember the faint smell of dust, sweet soy sauce, and roasted soybean flour as you stepped through the open sliding door? The store was always dim, usually run by a kind, deeply wrinkled old woman who seemed to have been there since the beginning of time. With just a single 10-yen coin clutched tightly in your sweaty palm, you faced agonizing choices. Would you buy the sweet, chewy soybean sticks, hoping to find a red mark on the toothpick that meant you won a free one? Or perhaps a small bottle of sweet soda with a glass marble inside? Or a tiny plastic toy? We would calculate our miniature budgets with the seriousness of bank managers. Outside the store, kids would sit on upside-down crates, trading baseball cards, comparing their purchases, and talking until the sky turned an intense shade of purple. The candy store was our exclusive sanctuary, a magical realm entirely separate from the world of adults, where a few bronze coins made you feel like the richest, luckiest child on the absolute face of the earth. One of the most profound things we have lost to the modernization of our cities is the gentle, acoustic soundtrack of the evening streets. If you close your eyes and return to a summer evening in the 1970s, you can hear it perfectly. The sharp, resonant, rhythmic clacking sound of wooden sandals echoing against the pavement. Back then, it was entirely common for adults to change into a comfortable cotton kimono and slip on their wooden sandals after their evening bath. Do you remember the feeling of the smooth, worn wood against the soles of your bare feet and the slight pinch of the fabric strap between your toes? People would stroll out of their homes to catch the cool evening breeze, perhaps walking to the corner store to buy a newspaper or a cold drink. The sound of those wooden sandals was not considered noise. It was the comforting rhythm of neighborhood life. You could hear someone approaching from down the street, their slow, unhurried pace telling you that the day's labor was finally over. Today, our modern rubber sneakers are silent, and our streets are filled with the roar of engines. But the wooden echo of those gentle evening strolls remains deeply carved into our memories, reminding us of a time when humanity moved at a natural, graceful pace. Before we could instantly stream any song we wanted with a single tap of a glass screen, music was something we had to hunt for, capture, and treasure. Do you remember the heavy, boxy cassette tape recorders we proudly placed on our desks? In the 1970s, recording your favorite pop song from the radio was a high-stakes operation that required absolute silence and intense focus. We would buy a blank cassette tape, insert it into the machine with a loud, satisfying click, and sit by the radio for hours, waiting for the weekly music countdown show. When the announcer finally introduced the song you had been waiting for, your heart would race. You had to hover your fingers perfectly over the play and record buttons, pressing them down together at the exact right millisecond. And the absolute worst tragedy was when the radio announcer continued talking over the instrumental introduction of the song. Or when your mother opened the bedroom door and loudly asked you a question, forever immortalizing her voice over your favorite track. But when you managed to get a clean recording, that cassette tape became your most prized possession. You listened to it until the magnetic tape literally wore out. The music meant so much more to us because of the sheer effort and patience it took to finally make it ours. And now, let us remember the warm, glowing presence of the kerosene stove during the freezing winter months. In the 1970s, central heating was a rare luxury, and our homes in Japan were incredibly cold in the winter. Do you remember the distinct, sharp smell of the kerosene when your father or older brother had to carefully refill the tank in the freezing entryway? It was a chore no one wanted to do, but it brought so much comfort. Once lit, the stove became the absolute center of the household. We did not just use it for warmth. It was a tool that brought the family together in one room. Mother would always place a heavy, steaming iron kettle on top of it, ensuring the dry winter air remained humid and comfortable. The soft whistling of that kettle is a sound that instantly brings back memories of dark, snowy evenings. And who could forget placing a piece of white rice cake on the grill of the stove? We would sit on the tatami mats, wrapped in thick blankets, watching the rice cake slowly puff up, bubble, and finally burst with a delightful golden brown crust. We would dip it in sweet soy sauce and eat it while it was almost too hot to hold. That stove was not just an appliance. It was the glowing, beating heart of the living room, drawing every family member into a close circle of warmth. If you walk through a modern residential neighborhood today, it is strangely quiet. But in our youth, the bright, snowy mornings were always punctuated by a rhythmic, booming sound echoing from the balconies and gardens. It was the sound of mothers vigorously beating the thick, cotton sleeping mats with a woven bamboo tool. Because we slept on the floor, keeping the bedding dry and clean was an essential daily chore. Do you remember how heavy those thick cotton mattresses were? Mother would heave them over the balcony railing to bake in the intense morning sunlight. And then she would use that bamboo beater, striking the cotton with a loud, satisfying, smacking sound to remove the dust and fluff up the fibers. It sounded like a neighborhood drum circle, a chorus of domestic care. But the true reward of this laborious chore came at night. When you unrolled your bedding onto the tatami mat and slipped under the heavy covers, it felt incredibly light, airy, and warm. And the smell, oh, do you remember that smell? It was the indescribable, comforting scent of pure sunshine trapped within the cotton threads. Burying your face into that sun-baked blanket gave you an overwhelming sense of safety and love. It was the scent of a mother's hard work, ensuring her children would have the sweetest, warmest dreams imaginable. Let us recall the quiet magic of the early morning milk delivery. Long before the sun came up, while the entire house was still wrapped in a deep slumber, the milk delivery man would ride his bicycle or small motorcycle through the dark, misty streets. Do you remember waking up just enough to hear the soft, melodic clinking of thick glass bottles echoing from the street? Every house had a small, painted wooden box nailed to the wall right next to the front door. The delivery man would quietly slip the fresh, heavy bottles of milk into the box, taking away the empty ones from the day before. When morning finally broke, retrieving those cold, dewy bottles was a special chore. The glass felt so substantial, so permanent in your hands. But the best part was opening it. The bottles were sealed with a small, thick paper cap. We used a special, tiny tool with a sharp needle on the end to pierce the cardboard and carefully pry it out. Licking the rich, thick cream off the bottom of that paper cap was a tiny, delicious luxury that we secretly cherished. Drinking that incredibly fresh milk straight from the cold glass bottle before rushing off to school gave us the vital energy we needed to face the day. It was a silent, daily pact of nourishment between the neighborhood and our families. Every house in the 1970s had a distinct heartbeat, and it came from the large, wooden pendulum clock mounted proudly on the living room wall. We affectionately called them bonbon clocks, named after the deep, resonant sound they made when striking the hour. Do you remember the intricate woodwork of the clock face and the shiny brass pendulum swinging back and forth with a hypnotic, steady rhythm? Tick-tock, tick-tock. It was the soundtrack of our childhood. These clocks were not powered by invisible batteries. They required human interaction to stay alive. Once a week, usually on a Sunday morning, the father of the house would open the small glass door and insert a heavy brass key into the dial. The loud, metallic clicking sound of winding the heavy mainspring was a ritual of responsibility, a literal winding up of the family's time for the week ahead. And when the hour struck, the deep, vibrating gong would echo through the entire house. It told us it was time for dinner, time to do homework, or time for bed. In the dead of night, when you woke up feeling lonely or afraid, the steady ticking of that clock from the other room was profoundly comforting. It reminded you that time was moving forward, that the house was standing strong, and that everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. Do you remember the delicate, colorful magic of traditional Japanese paper balloons? Long before children were mesmerized by glowing electronic screens, our entertainment was remarkably simple, relying entirely on imagination and a gentle touch. At the local candy store or festival stall, you could buy a tightly folded square of crisp, brightly colored paper. Do you recall the distinct, dusty smell of the traditional paper and the slightly bitter taste of the glue as you put the tiny hole to your lips and gently blew air into it? Watching that flat, lifeless piece of paper magically expand into a perfect, vibrant sphere was always a delightful surprise. Playing with a paper balloon required immense grace. You could not kick it or smash it like a heavy rubber ball. You had to use the open palm of your hand, gently tapping it upwards into the air. The crisp, rustling sound the paper made every time your hand struck it was incredibly soothing. We would see how long we could keep it floating, carefully dancing around the tatami room. And when the balloon eventually became dented or slightly torn, we would carefully fold it back up, pressing the air out and storing it safely in a drawer. It taught us to be gentle, to appreciate fragile beauty, and to find endless joy in the simplest, most quiet forms of play. Let us taste a memory that perfectly balances the sweetness of childhood with a sharp, nostalgic bitterness. In the early summer months, it was incredibly common for families to receive or purchase a large box of Japanese summer oranges. These fruits were entirely unlike the perfectly sweet, easily peeled mandarins we eat today. Do you remember how incredibly thick, tough, and bumpy the bright yellow skin was? It was almost impossible for a child's small hands to peel. We would sit on the porch, watching our grandmother skillfully score the thick rind with a sharp knife, using her strong thumbs to tear away the peel, releasing a sharp, intensely fragrant burst of citrus oil into the air. The smell was incredibly refreshing, but the flesh inside was astonishingly sour and slightly bitter. To make it palatable for us children, grandmother would carefully remove the thin, tough membranes from each individual slice, laying the glistening pulp in a small glass bowl. And then, the true magic happened. She would sprinkle a generous spoonful of pure white sugar over the sour fruit. The crunch of the sugar crystals, contrasting with the explosive bitter juice of the orange, was a flavor combination that defined our summers. It was a profound labor of love, turning something harsh and difficult into a sweet, unforgettable gift. In our modern world of disposable plastic bags and cheap paper wrapping, we have almost entirely lost the elegant, sustainable art of the traditional wrapping cloth. Back in the 1970s, this simple square of dyed fabric was an absolute necessity in every household. Do you remember watching your mother skillfully fold and tie a patterned piece of cloth around your father's wooden lunchbox, making sure the knot was incredibly secure yet easy to untie? The fabric was often deeply textured, dyed in rich shades of indigo blue or forest green, bearing traditional geometric patterns or family crests. It was a mesmerizing process to watch. With just a few quick folds and 2 decisive knots, a flat piece of cloth could instantly transform into a sturdy carrying bag for a heavy watermelon, a protective wrap for delicate glass bottles, or a beautiful presentation for a gift of sweet cakes. We never threw these cloths away. They were washed, ironed flat, and neatly folded into a drawer, ready to be used 1,000 times over. Receiving a gift wrapped in this cloth felt profoundly personal. It meant the giver had taken the time to wrap it with their own 2 hands, infusing the package with care and respect. It was a brilliant practical piece of everyday magic that taught us to cherish our resources and handle everything with genuine dignity. Before we stored thousands of digital photos on our phones, entirely forgetting they even exist, our memories were heavy, physical, and deeply precious. Do you remember the massive, incredibly heavy family photo albums that lived on the bottom shelf of the bookcase? These were not the sleek, printed books of today. They were thick binders, filled with heavy cardboard pages, covered in sticky adhesive, protected by a clear sheet of crinkling plastic. In the 1970s, taking a photograph with a heavy film camera was an expensive and rare event. We only captured the most important moments. When the developed prints finally arrived from the shop, often with the orange date stamped brightly in the corner, the entire family would gather around the low wooden table. Carefully peeling back that clear plastic sheet made a loud, distinct tearing sound that we all remember. We would meticulously arrange the glossy photos on the sticky page, perhaps sliding in a handwritten note or a ticket stub from a train journey, before smoothing the plastic back down, locking the memory in place forever. Over the years, the edges of those pages turned yellow and the adhesive lost its grip. But the sheer weight of that album in your lap, sitting with your parents and pointing at the faded smiles of your youth, was the greatest treasure a family could ever own. And finally, we arrive at a memory that perfectly captures the deep personal connections of our youth. As the cold winds of December began to blow, every household in Japan engaged in the sacred, monumental task of writing the New Year greeting cards. Today, we simply send a digital message or print a perfectly uniform badge from a computer. But back then, it was an entirely manual, deeply emotional labor. Do you remember the distinct, earthy smell of the black ink as you ground it against the heavy stone? Your parents would sit at the low table for hours, every single night, holding a fine bamboo brush, carefully writing the names and addresses of every single friend, relative, and co-worker by hand. The pile of blank white postcards slowly transformed into a mountain of warm wishes, tightly bound together with a rubber band. And on the morning of January 1st, the anticipation was absolutely electric. We would listen for the roaring engine of the postman's red motorcycle, pulling up to the mailbox, delivering a massive stack of cards tied with string. Reading the handwritten messages, recognizing the unique stroke of a grandmother's brush or the messy handwriting of a childhood friend brought tears of joy to our eyes. It was a tangible, physical proof that we were remembered, that we were loved, and that we belonged to a wonderful community. As we open our eyes and return to the present day, we must realize a beautiful truth. We do not just miss the heavy wooden tables, the fragrant mosquito coils, or the slow ticking of the pendulum clocks. What we truly miss is our youth, the unhurried passage of time, and the deep, unbreakable connections we shared with our families and neighbors. Those forgotten things were merely the vessels that held our love. If these memories brought a warm feeling to your heart today, please gently press the like button and subscribe to our channel for more journeys into the beautiful past. And now, I have a very important question for you. Which of these 20 memories made you smile the most, or brought back a forgotten scent from your childhood home? Please, write your story in the comments below. I promise to read every single one, because your memories are just as precious as mine. Until we meet again, stay warm, stay peaceful, and never let the beautiful memories of your youth fade away.